Well, another big bill that's moving along, I think it passed the floor of the House this past week, was the election reform law. We had long lines again in the 2012 election in Florida, and so there's some significant legislation that's already moved through the House. What do you anticipate happening?
This is going to pass in the Senate as well, I think. That's what I anticipate, and Governor Rick Scott unquestionably will sign it. And this is remarkable. The Republicans spent the last several years arguably doing things that in effect made it harder to vote. Democrats would say the Republicans intentionally tried to make it harder to vote over the last several years. Republicans say that's not the case. They did not do that. But I think a lot of the end results of some of the things that Republicans have done, changing ID requirements at the polls, reducing the number of early voting days. They've certainly made it more difficult to vote than it had been the most recent election. This bill goes back the other way.
In 1 year's time.
In 2 years, but yeah, one just right after the last election. So yeah, a year later, Republicans, a few months after the last election, Republicans said, okay, maybe we made a mistake, and this bill increases the potential for early voting from 8 days now to up to 14. And that's a complete reversal from the direction Republicans were going. Again, I think public opinion is at work here. I think a lot of Republicans looked out at the last election result and said, maybe we made a mistake. And also, if it really was the intent, and I'm not saying it was, but if it had been the intent to make it harder to vote for Democrats, well, it didn't work because President Obama won in Florida. So, I think that pragmatically, again, this is a lot of people say, why would you want to reduce the chances to vote? Now they're going to go back the other way. That's passed the House already. I think very likely to pass the Senate and go to the governor, and he'll sign it.
Well, a curious piece of legislation is circulating now. I had not even heard about it before. To clarify that foreign citizens or visitors who come to Florida can use their native or their own national driver's license to drive in Is I didn't know they couldn't.
Well, they didn't either, and that was part of the problem. This is something that changed in the law last year. This is another case of the legislature looking at something they did and saying, oh, wait, maybe we need to make a change and go back the other way. They changed the law last year to create international driver's permits and make it necessary for foreign drivers in Florida to have international driver's permits. The reasoning was, they said the police needed this because sometimes the police would pull over a driver from another country. They ask them for a driver's license. They can't read it. It's in another language. They don't know whether it's expired. They can't figure out how to read the driver's license. The problem was nobody told the Canadians about this bill. And the law changed January 1, and a lot of Canadians were caught off guard, and they're driving around Broward County and down in Fort Myers. And if you've ever driven around Broward County in the winter, every third license plate is from Ontario, and every fourth one is from Quebec. Those people come in droves, 3 million Canadians a year to Florida. And there was some concern that, wait a minute, if we make it hard for them to drive in Florida, they may not come. So the legislature wants to undo this. There's a bill rushed to the House floor. It's going to come up in the House this week to undo that requirement. The Highway Patrol wasn't really enforcing it anyway because they weren't sure it was constitutional because there were some treaties that they were worried about. So, but if you're from Canada, come on down. They're going to fix that.
Okay, some more interesting legislation is on the floor, Senate floor, to clarify that citizens have the right to speak at public meetings. I didn't know that we didn't have that right, but go ahead.
Another thing that neither you nor many people out there really realized was the case. It is the case under current law that you could go to a local government meeting, let's say a city commission or a city council or county commission or a water and soil board meeting or a school board meeting, and you have something to say about a proposed change, maybe a proposed ordinance in your city. And the city council or the county commission could say, I'm sorry, we are not hearing from the public on this matter. I think a lot of people are surprised by that, but that is the case. There is no obligation to hear from the public before making a change. That would change under a bill that is before the legislature. It will be on the Senate floor this week. It says that in these local government commissions and councils and boards that are covered by the Sunshine Law must allow for people to speak. Now, they can put restrictions on the time, how long people are allowed to speak, certain reasonable restrictions on it, but they have to hear from people who want to speak.
Does this apply to the legislature?
The legislature currently generally hears from people, but as you know, they can shut down the number of people who speak to legislative committees, and this bill would not change the way they do things in the legislature.
And then finally, David, there is some legislation, interesting legislation, to give domestic partners certain rights under Florida law that they currently do not have. First of all, domestic partners, what does that mean, and what are some of the new rights?
Well, what does that mean was part of the problem with this bill. Last week, this bill was in a committee, and it was going to go down to a no vote, and they pulled it from consideration. The sponsor pulled it from consideration, made some changes, narrowed the bill down, and now it basically says that it's going to be a domestic partner registry situation, like we already have in several cities and counties around Florida. Sarasota has one, for example. It says you get on this registry of domestic partners, someone you've lived with for a long time. It could be a gay relationship or a straight relationship. You're on a domestic partner registry, and this bill would say that those people have some of the rights that married couples enjoy by right that currently people who are in long-term committed relationships don't have. Some examples would be, the one that's most often cited is you're visiting someone in the hospital. It could be the case now, we've heard this anecdote several times, that someone has gone to a hospital and says, my partner is up there in a hospital bed dying. I'm family, I'd like to be able to go up there. And the hospital says, I'm sorry, you're not family. And these people say, well, look, I've lived with this person 50 years. This bill would clarify that, look, in that situation, under a domestic partner registry situation, those people would have hospital visitation rights. There are some property ownership things that would be covered. There's things like last will and testament. Right now, if you die without a will, your spouse is automatically presumed to be the recipient of your things. But if you're not married, that goes into court or into probate. Under this bill, if you had a domestic partner, they would be presumed like a spouse to get your stuff, that kind of thing. So these rights are spelled out in this bill. I'm not sure this bill's going to pass. There are opponents who say it is a slippery slope to gay civil unions, a way to get around gay marriage, prohibitions on gay marriage. There's a lot of opposition to this bill. The sponsor, a Democrat, Eleanor Sobel in the Senate, has worked to try to narrow that bill to try to get some votes on it. I'm not sure she's going to get there. It'll be interesting to see.
Thank you, David. For more news about Florida politics and government, visit the Advances section of our website.